1, 2, 3, 4.
Hi everyone, this is Jewish Talk coming to you live from NASA Community College on 90.3 WHPC, also streaming on the iHeart and the iTunes app. We can be seen in the studios right now on my Facebook Live page as well as the Facebook Live at WHPC. Good morning to Karen. And this program is later archived on the Spreaker.com. So hi there, my name is Rabbi Pearl. Ay, gewalt, I nearly forgot. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. This all depends on when you're listening or watching. I've heard that one before. Oh, let me tell you something. You know, one of the most insidious messages Hollywood has foisted on us is that only the bad have fun. People of dubious character always seem to do interesting things, drive fast cars, get all the really good lines. Good guys are boring, simple, and one-dimensional. You might be thinking, well, that's what they really are like. But the truth, however, I'm here to tell you this morning, dear friends, is quite the opposite. And to join us in the great fun today is all our wonderful listeners, and to Harvey Kipnis, to Stephen Mark Shaw, welcome back, and to Dr. Kilshevsky, thank you so much for joining us. So let me tell you a true story. A friend who's a very sharp cookie had her car towed away in Washington, D.C. I know nobody has heard of Washington, D.C., but there's a place called Washington, D.C., and she had her car taken away. When she went to collect it, she explained to the attendant that the police towed it improperly since it was really parked legally. The attendant agreed, but told her that he couldn't release the car unless the fine was paid. However, he said, when she gets the car back, she could appeal and get her money back. After reluctantly paying the fine, she got the car and asked for the appropriate Office of Appeals. She was given the information, but the attendant added this warning: you won't get your money back. Why? This person said. Because the person who runs the office is a miserable person, whose only joy in life is the power he wields and never gives back the fines, ever. Not being one to just sit by and party, to be party of injustice, she thought that there has to be a way to get her money back. She called the appeals office, and after reaching Mr. Control Freak and explaining the details of the incident and why she was unjustly fined, she added this line: I am sure you cannot help me, so could you please direct me to the person who has the power to give me back my money? You can't imagine the response. Oh no, I'm that person. I can give you back your money. And so he did. As King Solomon says, this is in Proverbs 10:20, bad people have few choices. Once you understand someone else's base desire, he really has few to no choices in life. He will do whatever power, greed, arrogance, jealousy, whatever it happens to be, tells him to do. So in a sense, this miserable guy was one-dimensional. Therefore, it's the good guys who really have the depth and the character in life. Bad people are extremely boring. They only think about one thing and cannot rise to the occasion. They are caught in a web of their own desires and insecurities. And they live old, and they die old. You see, youth has nothing to do with whether your birthday coming up starts with a 5, a 6, or a 7, and up. Young people, whatever birthday they are celebrating, know life is full of opportunities. They know good prevails. They know a good deed is a lot better than the alternative. And they believe in people, and they believe in the future. This is something that is pointed out in this week's Torah reading. Old is not a factor of the years you have lived. It's a factor of the way you live those years. Take, for example, an old age home. You go to visit an old age home, and you can easily tell the difference between old and the young. Sometimes the young are wheeling the old. Sometimes it's the other way around. Either way, no number will help you figure out who's who. Only the smiles, or the lack thereof, on their faces. And that's how this week's Torah portion begins. We read about Sarah, our matriarch. Torah tells us she died at 127 years young. Because Rashi points out, Rashi, who's the preeminent commentator, points out, as she was at 7, so at 20 and at 100. And they were all equally good, all equally young. I want to pause for a moment and say hello to everybody listening. Thank you for joining us each Sunday from 8:30 to 9 a.m. And I want to say good morning to Patty Fuchs, to Lori Balaban Berger. Good morning. Thank you. To Zalman Stewart Wag. Thank you so much. Harvey Kipnis. And if I hope I didn't leave anybody out, but if as soon as your name comes up, we'll say hello and give you a shout out and wish everybody, both listening and watching, a wonderful day. So I don't want to waste any time. Mr. Cohen is pacing nervously in the waiting room of a hospital maternity. And he's in the ward, and his wife is giving birth to their first child. Suddenly, the door swings open, and the doctor appears. Mr. Cohen, I have good news and bad news. The good news is that the birth went smoothly. The bad news is that your son has a condition which in time will kill him. Oi, Gewalt, Mr. Cohen says in shock. This is terrible. What can we do? I'm afraid we can't do anything. Nothing can be done. A cure has not been found. Furthermore, scientists have abandoned hope of ever finding a cure. Your son is definitely going to die. Oh no, says Mr. Cohen. What is this condition called? Life, answers the doctor. Life. The saying goes, time is money. But given the choice, which is really more important? 5 minutes or $5? It's obvious that time is more precious than money. We have a limited amount of time on this earth. The older we get, the clearer that becomes. When we're young, we may feel like we live forever. So what's the difference if I waste a decade? But reality eventually catches up. Legend has it that one of the queens of England way back said, I'd give up all my fame and riches just for one more hour of life. And so one of the biggest human tragedies is to waste time. Gossip, to wasting time on moronic jokes, sitcoms, mindless surfing through the cyberspace. Someone pointed out to me in Los Angeles, a billboard for a popular entertainment promenade read the following: the place to go when you've got nothing to do. That is, killing time, and vice versa. There's a more subtle way of wasting time as well. I recall seeing a poster in a low-scale department store advertising clothes to fit your busy lifestyle. The poster was appealing to our human desire to be busy. If we're busy, we feel important. What are we really accomplishing? Imagine a tombstone that reads, this gentleman, he ran a lot of errands. Gewalt. Isn't there more to life than just being busy? So the title of this week's Torah portion is called Chaya Sarah, which literally translates the life of Sarah. Strangely, our Torah portion does not discuss the life of Sarah, but rather describes her death and her burial. And the portion continues this theme and ends with the death of Abraham. So if this parsha, this section is all about death, why is it called life? You see, life is like a boat. Typically, a boat is launched upon its maiden voyage. We have hopes and expectations that the boat will travel safely and successfully. But what happens when many years later, when the boat, beaten and weathered, comes back to dock? Where are the cameras, the crowds, the champagne? Judaism says that this is precisely the time for celebration, because that is when we can evaluate and appreciate the success of the vessel, which explains why the Torah uses the deaths of Sarah and Abraham to trumpet the great value of their lives. And it was pointed out to me recently, if you think about this, every portion that deals with the opposite of life has a fascinating name. The portion that talks about the passing of Sarah is called Chaya Sarah, the life of Sarah. In the Torah portion that speaks about the passing of our forefather Jacob, it's called Vayechi Yaakov, and Jacob lived. And even in the last portion of the Torah, it speaks about at the time of the passing of Moses. What's the name of that portion? V'zois habracha. This was the blessing. Fascinating. That's the depth, of course, is that exactly, because when a person passes away, we know what kind of life they have. Of course, part of living is to be in a position of daily growth. See, the growth spurts of a child can be measured in terms of months. Speak to Dr. Kildare. He knows all about this stuff. For an adult, growth is detected over a period of years. But why should this be so? Just as we would not expect a 10-year-old to be acting as he did at age 5, why should a 40-year-old act as he did at the age of 35? Yet, in describing Abraham's life, the Torah says, these are the days of the years of Abraham's life. The Torah is comparing days to years to tell us that while the average person's growth can be measured in years, Abraham and Sarah could be measured in days. They had daily growth spurts. They lived full days. Sometimes you might think, I can be growing more if only my life weren't so difficult. Now, I got to tell you, my friend, that's a fallacy, because our growth, greatest growth, comes not during the easy times, but in the difficult times. The Talmud says that all of Sarah's years were equally in goodness. She had an easy life. Wow. She suffered. For first 90 years, she was barren and was kidnapped twice. Abraham, too. He fought wars. He was thrown into a fiery furnace. They had difficult lives. Yet no matter what happened, Sarah saw every event as an opportunity to learn and to grow. There's no such thing as standing still. Life is a constant state of movement, of entropy. If we're not growing, we're withering. You know, the average American spends 250 hours each year commuting, another 2 hours standing in line. Over a 40-year working career, that adds up to 18,000 hours. And what do we have to show for it? Right? That we can recognize every hit song from the 60s and the 70s? Oy gewalt. That we're listening to hours and hours of political analysis on talk radio? That we cheered the Yankees to the pennant? Come on, there has to be something more in life. Driving and daydreaming is throwing money out the window. Instead, why don't we focus on learning, being more? Step out of the mold, right? We grow up thinking we must fit into a mold. But as I jokingly say, those who think they're only living in a mold can sometimes turn moldy. So let's set a goal, whether it's to learn Hebrew, go through a series on Jewish history, while eating or while commuting, listen to some audio classes, make the time meaningful. There's no shortage of opportunities if we only desire to make it into a reality. I want to say hello to Joanne Sand. Thank you so much for joining us. And let's see who else has joined us here today. Yehuda Asa Klein, thank you so much. Listening from Williamsburg. To Jean, let's see now. Wow. Doug, good morning to you. Now, Dr. Kilshevsky points out, Sarah did not have an easy life. She lived in a tent, had to cook for the 3 angels, and she became pregnant at 90. Wow. And of course, the Judge Robert Rosenthal, thank you for joining us today. Our best wishes for a speedy recovery and all good blessings to you. See, one of my favorite stories illustrates this idea of making every moment count. There was a great rabbi in the 19th century. His name was Chassam Sofer. It would take him several years to learn through the entire volumes of the Talmud, cover to cover. Upon completion, he would celebrate with family and friends. One time, he announced another celebration, really just a few months after the previous one. So his friend said to him, "But your cycle is not done to complete for several years. What are you celebrating?" "Ha ha ha," he explained. "All this time I've been learning through the Talmud on a second concurrent cycle. I learned whenever I had 5 minutes to spare, whenever standing in line, waiting for some event to start, or while traveling. In this way, 5 minutes at a time, I was able to amass many extra years of Torah study." So, dear friends, let's not waste the time given to us. Let's learn from our matriarch, Sarah, that the entire life, as was just pointed out, she had a difficult life. But her life was good because it was filled with meaning and with purpose. Now, of course, you're going to say to me, "Rabbi, this all sounds nice in theory, but we need time to relax. Come on already." Well, that's why I encourage people to come to synagogue. Come to my synagogue, and you can relax. When I give a speech, I tell you, everybody falls asleep. Invariably. In fact, this Shabbos, there was one guy, he started to snore. So I told the president, hey, wake him up. He says, listen, Rabbi, you put him to sleep, you wake him up. There was another guy, every time, 10 minutes into the speech, he falls asleep. On the button. 1 week I look up, I'm just putting my papers together. I look up, he's already sleeping. I said, hey, Moshe, what are you sleeping for? He says, I trust you. My friends, you need to relax. So come to shul. Listen to the rabbi's sermon. You're going to guarantee to fall asleep. You're going to have plenty of time to relax. Of course, everyone needs time to recharge, seriously, and to refresh themselves. So don't waste a minute. Doesn't mean having a book in front of you 24 hours a day. After all, we've got to do some sleeping. Rather, the Jewish idea of relaxing means to tune into another aspect of life at any given moment. Relax, but don't space out. Make all of our actions purposeful and directed. When we sleep, it should be for the purpose of resting the body, so we'll have the strength to do something truly meaningful. In this way, the sleep itself becomes meaningful. Similarly, when we visit a friend, rather than spend the time chattering about news, what's going on in Washington, Oi Gewalt, the sports and the Jets, that's in honor of the judge, and weather, instead brainstorm ways to assist the community. Or talk about the weekly Torah portion. Talk about my program, if there's anything to talk about. Or take a walk through nature. Even though you change gears, it's not quitting. That's part of growth. You see, all of us, as descendants of Abraham and Sarah, we have inherited their spiritual genes. Every moment of their lives was purposeful and meaningful. So our question, our blessing, of course, our thought is, may their example inspire us to do the same. You know, there's an expression called a journey of 1,000 miles. Our parsha, our Torah portion, again, contains the most serene description of old age and dying anywhere in the Torah. Then Abraham, I'm quoting, breathed his last. He died at a good old age, an old man full of years, and he was gathered to his people. Now there's an earlier verse, no less moving. It says, Abraham was old, well advanced in years, and God had blessed him with everything. Now, nor was this the serenity, the gift of Abraham alone. When we think of Sarah, we also, as I've been discussing, Sarah lived for 127 years, and yet there's a phrase there that emphasizes that not just telling us how old she was, 127, but by adding the words that these were the years of Sarah's life, as Rashi explains, that the first part we are telling us the quantity of her life, 127, how long she lived, while the second, by telling us these are the years that she lived, is that it's telling us that she lived with a life of quality. Now, how could this be, thinking about Abraham and Sarah? They were commanded by God, look at their life, to leave everything that was familiar. Their land, their home, their family, travel to a land unknown to them. No sooner had they arrived than they were forced to leave because of the famine. Twice, Abraham's life was at risk when driven into exile. He worried that he would be killed, so that the local ruler would take Sarah into his harem. Sarah herself had to say that she was Abraham's sister, and had to suffer the indignity of being taken into a stranger's household. Come on. That difficult life, as Dr. Kilshevsky points out. There was a long wait for a child, made even more painful by the repeated divine promise that they would have many children as the stars of the sky or the dust of the earth. Then came the drama of the birth of Ishmael to the servant Hagar. This aggravated the relationship between the two women, and eventually Abraham had to send Hagar and Ishmael away. Come on, they had a difficult life. One way or another, this was a source of pain to all four people involved. Then there was the agony of the binding of Isaac. Abraham was faced with the prospect of losing the person most precious to him, the child he had waited for so long. So one way or another, neither Abraham nor Sarah had an easy life. Theirs were lives of trial, in which their faith was tested at many points. So how can Rashi tell us that all of Sarah's life were equal in goodness? Kulan shavim l'tova. How could the Torah say that Abraham had been blessed with everything? The answer is given in the Torah itself, and it's very unexpected. 7 times Abraham had been promised the land. Yet by the time Sarah dies, Abraham had no land, and he was forced to bow down before the local Hittites and beg for permission to acquire even a single field with a cave in which to bury his wife. Even then he had to pay what is clearly a massively inflated price, 400 silver shekels. This doesn't sound like the fulfillment of God's promise that Abraham would have land to the north, to the south, to the east, and to the west. Then, in relationship to children, Abraham is promised no less than 4 times that he would have children. Yet he had to wait so long for even a single child by Sarah, and that's when God insisted that she would have a son. And both Abraham and Sarah laughed. Can you imagine? Couldn't believe it. So one way or another, whether we think of children or the land, the 2 key divine promises to Abraham and Sarah, the reality was it fell far short of what they might have felt entitled to expect. But that's exactly our lesson, our meaning and message for this week. In it, Abraham does 2 things. He buys the first plot in the land of Canaan, and he arranges for the marriage of Isaac. 1 field and a cave was, for Abraham, enough for the text to say that God had blessed him with everything. 1 child, Isaac, by then married and with children, was enough for Abraham to die in peace. So the meaning is clear. If we ensure that our children will continue to live for what we have lived for, then we can have the faith they will continue your journey until eventually they reach the destination. Abraham did not need to see all the land to be in charge of the entire land of Canaan. Nor did he need to see his descendants become numerous. He had taken the first step. He began the task. He knew that his descendants would continue it. He was able to die serenely because he had the faith in God and faith that others would complete what he had begun. And that same was surely true for Sarah. To place one's life in God's hands, to have the faith that whatever happens to you happens for a reason, to know that you are part of a larger narrative, and to believe that others will continue what you began, my friends, is to achieve a satisfaction in life that cannot be destroyed by any circumstance. So Abraham and Sarah had that faith, and they were able to die with a sense of fulfillment. To be happy does not mean that you have to have everything you want or everything you were promised. It means simply to have done what you were called on to do, to have made a beginning, and then to have passed on the baton to the next generation. I often say that what do we owe our parents? There's a Mishnah. The Mishnah says we owe a lot to our parents. It goes through portfolios, financial inheritance. It could be the way we look, the DNA, the strengths that we have. But what's the most important thing that we owe our parents is that they gave us a baton to continue on to the next generation. All the other things that I mentioned, whether it's the financial inheritance or the way we look or our personalities, that's handed to us. We have no choice in the matter, but we do have a choice in what we do with what God gives us and what we continue into the future. Guess what? Abraham and Sarah had the greatest faith in their children, the future children, that they would have all the blessings, and therefore they were able to say and experience a life filled with blessings and could die peacefully, because they knew that you and me would be here and would continue on to make sure there was a future. As the Talmud tells us, the righteous, even in death, are regarded as though they are still alive, because the righteous leave a living trace in those who come before them. That was enough for Abraham and Sarah, and therefore it must be enough for us. My friends, I want to share with you a thought. Let me just say hello to all those who are joining us. Thank you. And of course, on our Facebook, let's see who else is Good morning to Susan Kay, to Jill. Thank you. To Gail Cole. Thank you. Jonathan Wolf, welcome back. Jed Foreman from Florida. Thank you so much. To Karen Dombeck. And thank you for all your comments. So this is the thought. We all read about fascinating thought. Very briefly. We talk about Abraham. He's 99 years old. We talk about his life. He's 99 years old. He has his circumcision and his bris. And it's the third day. And it's very painful. And we know how God comes to him to visit him, of course. And then in the middle of the conversation, Torah tells us he looked up and he sees some strangers and he puts God on hold. He says, God, I'll be right back. He says, listen, he says, God, you'll enjoy the music on hold. And he takes care of his guests. And he gives them the food and he watches over them and he gives them advice and all the good things that we know about Abraham. And the question we discussed in the synagogue yesterday, can you imagine you're talking to God? Some strangers show up. So turn around to this stranger and say, listen, I want to give you to eat. I want to hang in there. Wait for me. I'm talking to God. What do we see with Abraham? He puts God on hold and he takes care of the strangers. Come on, doesn't make sense. And of course the answer is, what we learn from there is that greater is welcoming guests than even the Shekhinah of this communication with God. So on the surface, it seems a little bit difficult. At the end of the day, where did Abraham get such an audacity, so to speak? So this is the thought. The truth is, if you're speaking to God, you're having a wonderful godly experience. You're elevated. You feel great. You're feeling more, closer to God. It's good. But if you have a chance to help some strangers, it's okay to put God on hold because you're becoming God-like. When you're having a conversation with God, you're having an out-of-body experience, so to speak. But if you go out there and you go and help someone, a stranger, who's out there on a very hot day and give them to eat and to drink or give them some advice and tell them what to do, you become God-like. You're emulating God. So at the end of the day, what's more important? To have an experience with God or to emulate the ways of God? And that's, my friends, is what our sages are telling us this week. Let's find good reasons to emulate God. Sure, there's times to sit back, sit in the synagogue at home and pray and have that experiences and reconnect and strengthen our relationship with God. But ultimately, the real test is when we are out in the street or an opportunity comes our way when we can help someone, do we say, it's not for me. I'm going to pray. I'm going to learn more, and I'll be worrying about my own spirituality. That is the time for that. But when Abraham teaches us, you can be in the middle of a conversation. God comes to visit you, so to speak, right? God comes to visit Abraham. He had every good reason to say, hey, take it easy, guys. I'll see you around. And let me continue my relationship with God. He put God on hold. And we commend Abraham for that. And we learn from that it's more important at key moments in our life to be God-like, to emulate the ways of God, than to be worried and focused on our own spirituality. So, dear friends, have a wonderful week. Thank you so much for joining us. Shalom, and stay well. Thank you again.